All right. So I guess we'll dive in. It looks like I'm leading this, at least for now, so that's cool, I guess. So for those that don't know me, hi, I'm Jason. I've been part of the core team of the OWASP Top 10 LM for the last year plus, I guess, or so, shortly before the first one came out. I dabble a ton with a lot of different stuff. The way I refer to myself is I play a lot. So I have lots of opinions. Often I'm wrong, and I'm happy to have people yell at me and tell me where I'm wrong. So I guess that's me in a nutshell. I don't know if we want to go around and do introductions. I don't think we need to, but I just wanted to give some context for like how I happen to be the one leading this. It's nothing specific to me. It's just I happen to be around a lot. So I got blamed. This subgroup, so there's an Agentic AI sub-initiative that's being spun up with the OWASP Top 10 LM. And there's a couple of different projects within that. One of them is threat modeling. So this group is specifically tasked with answering the question, how do we go about threat modeling agentic systems? And then I have an important sub-goal that I'm adding to that, which is without duplicating efforts, right? So there's a couple of existing activities that are going on that are trying to answer this same question, and we don't want to duplicate those efforts either internally to the OWASP Top 10 for LLM or any of the other, at least OWASP projects that are doing similar work. So there's a couple of other AI-based OWASP projects. There's the OWASP AI Exchange that has some stuff. And actually, I've got some lists here. And then we've got a sub-project of the LLM Top 10 is the AI Security and Governance Checklist, which does already have some, at least a checklist of things to consider when doing agentic AI threat modeling. I think that can be fleshed out, and I think that's the question, right? What do we want to do? There's work out there already. Ken, I know you've done some work as well. You've recently published a doc that you've opened up for comments, and I think we can talk about that. And I expect probably a lot of our conversation here will be today. A bunch of us have probably started similar projects, right? And how can we combine our forces to make something cool? I guess let me stop there before I go to this slide. Is there any questions or comments, or want to jump in and say, I think we should do something else?
I think the goals are great. I mean, like this is I might have mentioned it in a different version of the of this meeting series, but like, you know, I think the types of docs we're talking about creating are exactly what I was kind of hoping to find on and reuse at work, and so this is great. I'm excited.
Cool.
And is it, well, and I realize these are open questions up there, but like, would the goal be to create a new framework versus, I mean, more of a guide of like, hey, here's how to think about some of this stuff. Here's sort of the concerns, and here's techniques you can use to sort of address that. I think maybe which the bottom point there covers.
Yeah, so I think that's where we're going to spend most of the conversation today, is figuring, and that's what I think John is looking for out of this call, is come back to John with a direction of, this is the way we think this should go, and then we can start planning how to work to achieve that.
Makes sense.
So I think the main question is those first two, right? I think there's two ways to do this. One is we create a brand new framework specific to agentic systems, and the other is we leverage existing frameworks and figure out the delta between what's there and what might be new for agentic systems, and then we write some kind of process, documentation, whatever, that covers that delta. I definitely have an opinion on which direction we should go, but I know there's others on this call that also have opinions. So I think I'm going to shut up now and let's have this conversation of what do we think we should do. Yeah, Ken.
Yes. So let me share the document.
Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm trying to see the screen which I can share.
Let me know if you have a problem with that. I think I opened it up, but
think I can, but didn't see the document that I opened. That is weird. Sorry about that. Maybe I have. Yeah, I think this one. So, yeah, I think it's what I did. Actually, my research group. Oh, stop sharing. Sorry about that. Okay. Now, hopefully, you can still see it. Right.
Yep, we got it.
Okay. So, yeah, so I look at the existing. Yeah, I think we certainly need to leverage as much as possible the existing framework. Basically, some top framework, Strata is Microsoft. It's certainly many people use. We can leverage it. Pasta is also very good from different perspective. And this LinkedIn is also good. So I list like 5 or 6, right, of this and see how it can cover agent and what need to be added somehow, right? So then have some gap analysis here, open for discussion. But I think this is what I, within our research group, we identified. And then potentially we need a new model here. It's called whatever name, right? We can change it. I think in the future, the agent mostly it could be a multiple agent environment. We can talk about single agent, but it's more like the interaction between them has the threat. So some principles it's mentioned here, and also the layered approach, right, and the risk-based. So these are principles, and then some of element. This kind of incorporate the reference architecture. That's still up to discussion, but the layered architecture is good for us to discuss, and also the potential vulnerabilities. And so this is more like for us as a starting point, a way of thinking. How can we approach it in terms of what we can leverage now, what need to be added, right? I think also Long from yesterday meeting, he proposed some code example is very good for one of the agent framework. So this we can leverage as well. So yeah, it's getting too deep, like into each layer. But I still think it's a starting point we can discuss. It's just some of the internal work we have been doing.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Nate? Looks like you're muted. Sorry, Nate.
Killing me this week. I'm really having a hard time with that button. I think the, I mean, like, thanks Ken for putting this together, because like being able to reference the existing frameworks is certainly valuable. I mean, a lot of people have done a lot of work there. And so I guess my background ends up being like working with a lot of scale ups. And so just, I guess, to color the sort of answer on my side, but I usually find that doing sort of the more full-featured frameworks, like developers tend to avoid this, like the plague, because it's just super heavy, and like we can all agree it's a good idea in a vacuum, but just with the realities of development pressure and stuff, it gets avoided. So, I mean, for me, what would be really useful is how can we sort of pragmatically give people guidance on what to think about, like what can go wrong? How can you sort of think about that? How can you help teams understand what sort of situations to look out for? Because with agentic systems, it's super open-ended, and a lot of developers and product people aren't thinking of this stuff. So the like Adam Shostak's Cheap, Fast, Good paper, where he's talking about how to kind of leverage all of the like just being very pragmatic about it. But I think with AI and sort of agentic specific guidance of like, hey, if you build a system this way, these are things to be considering. If you're using tools, these are things to be considering. And like, how can you structure that in a way that you can pull developers in and make it really interactive and help them think through these things and sort of understand what protections they can come up with? To me, at least, that would be more useful. But I'm not working with like big shops. I don't know sort of how that differs in a larger organization.
Yeah, so just a quick comment. I think it's really good as a security guide. The final output is security guide, right? This is really for us to decide the approach. So this is more like a theoretical abstracting level with some of the ideas like how can we do approach. So the threat modeling is more for the security researchers, right, or security team. And the eventual product, we do have a section for the security, right? It's a security guide. So this is more, we need the practical guidance, even some code examples.
Yeah, and that gets back to the how do we avoid duplication, right? So we have, to your point, Nate, I think we've got developer like things to think about and consider at a high level documentation that's being worked on right now. For super technical security folks, we've got the red teaming document that's going to have a threat modeling section in it. Right. So I think we can point to those to address kind of that audience. And then this we can keep really tightly focused on, I'm a security practitioner, I'm doing design reviews or whatever, I need to threat model what this agentic system looks like, and let that be the audience that we're talking to for this. Does that make sense?
Yep. And that's for feeding into, like, so they'd be working with product and engineering beforehand, right? Of like, hey, let's talk through what capabilities are, and then let's think through what can go wrong and what can we do about it, all of that.
I mean, ideally beforehand, but we know how the real world is, right? So oftentimes it'll be like, yeah, we're shipping this tomorrow, and we need you to review it now.
Well, so much of that is because the people are afraid that you're going to drag them into a 4-month process, and so they just avoid you. So hopefully we can change some of that, but.
Yeah. So one thing maybe need to add to this document before it's getting too long. I think it's maybe a little bit too long already. But one is really the data flow diagram. It could be, depends on different agents, right? So maybe we at least have some generic like data flow diagram, but it's associated also with this 7-layer architecture because the data flows between different layers. So this is maybe something like we're also considering, and I think we can make it public contribution and make it public as well. My sense is this is more like a tool for us, for maybe the group that here to do the security guide. It's kind of intermediate work so far, but eventually should we publish it? I think maybe we should, right? Right. So
yeah, so I know the intent is that we're going to publish. It's going to be rolled up into the summary docs.
Right. Yeah.
And I think you're right, Ken, right? Like the reason why all of us join these groups and do this is because we want to help write the tools that we wish we have. So,
yeah,
for sure.
right.
Vinny, I see your hand.
Yeah, I really like this doc, Ken, and the Maestro modeling framework is really cool. I think that we can definitely like kind of do both, like what Nate was saying, like the examples we use as diagrams can be sort of like real world examples you might see, and then you know, reference the Maestro framework for how you might like look into those and figure out where in your system these two. Like I really like the framework for security researchers because like it's tough to even try to figure out like what to think about and how to think about it and how to approach like where the new stuff is and where all those vulnerabilities are, aside from just like looking at your application, especially if you're not like building a complicated application, like the example might not be like super relevant also.
Right. So one approach I think is just comment on this, like I make this public commentable, right? So like in the share, I think everyone can comment, right? So just comment this to see what need to be deleted, what can be added. The idea is still keep it short, like hopefully it's within 20 pages, right, at the end, so people actually read. We do find that if it's too long, people don't read it, right? So maybe just read the first part, then that's it. So So whenever we try to add things, see something if we can delete from there. So that's also will be beneficial.
So I guess maybe the question is, do we want to just take Ken's doc and kind of run with that as a base starting point for this project? I think I'm hearing the general agreement to that.
I think so. There's so much background work done, like evaluating all the existing ones. That's really great.
Yeah, because some of additional work, also some research will be published in archive, right? Just as a background. But if your contribution is included, we will also put your contribution. But I don't think we will take whatever your contribution to publish. Right? We already have some other things, like in terms of architectural pattern, which may not relevant to what we're talking about, is in the work. Yeah, just a disclaimer here. But yeah, whatever here is public, even when we do the publication, we'll reference it to say based upon this work.
And so I guess looking at your doc, Ken, the answer to this question, it seems like is both. The answer is both. Because if I'm reading this right,
Mm-hmm.
the Maestro framework is really a new framework, but it's only aiming at the delta between what's already there and what's new for Agentic. And I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is that generally what the group feels as well? And then this is something I keep coming back to, and this is an unsettled question in my head right now. So I think there's probably some conversation that we can have around this last point. How much of this document can we point to and say, don't let the word agent get in the way. It's still just an app. And yes, there's some nuance, and yes, there's some additional complexities that come into play, especially with things like autonomy. But at some base foundational level, it's an app. And so general AppSec rules apply. It's not like this new magical thing, right?
Yeah, so that's why the threat modeling, the older way, is still working, because it's essentially it's the app, but app on top of app, it's you said it has decision making, autonomy, all this planning, right, reflection capability. So it's making it more powerful, that especially when it's communicate with other agent, that make it even right more. Kind of like if we don't threat modeling it, there's kind of downside impact. So in this sense, we should really call it still agent, but we have a disclaimer that it's a super app, or somehow like it's an app, right? But it may be a super app, and for that reason, we need a new framework to suggest to address the kind of the gaps.
Sure. Benjamin?
Yeah, hi folks.
Yeah,
That's right. Hi folks, I'll just introduce myself first. I'm Anshuman. I work for Lyft. I'm the AppSec lead there. And I've tried to build agents. I also wrote a blog a few days ago. So in my experience, what I've seen is, again, I think the definition of what an agent is still pretty ambiguous. It could be as simple as, a single Python file with a few functions, or it could be as complex as, you have a system that interacts with multiple apps, like Ken mentioned. So I think if we consider the autonomy aspect of it, obviously autonomy is, in my opinion, what makes agents different from normal apps that we are used to, right? Because we can't really control the outcomes, and we can control the input, but we can't control the outcome. So I think autonomy is probably one of the biggest factors, according to me, that should be considered in this new framework, of how we sort of figure out what could go wrong, what can we do about it, right? the 4 questions. And I think there's also the other aspect of when we consider an agent, right? Agents have access to tools. Now, these tools could be integrated with external OSS tools. It could be integrated with external API calls, right? How do those structured outputs and inputs work? I think those are also important integration points. So I feel like any point where the agent interacts with a third-party system is an avenue where things could go very wrong, or it could be safe. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, definitely agree. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Go first.
Sorry. I was just gonna build on Shivan's comments. I mean, I think one of the things that I've been having a little bit of difficulty at work, at least since for context, I work at Asana, and like we're building some agentic AI type features into our tools, and like one of the things that I've been having a little bit of trouble getting my head around is like to what degree like the tool usage and in particular LLMs as a tool that are available to agents sort of expand or change the threat model, because it feels like just as a straw man, like if we take an agentic system, take the LLM tool calling out, is like it feels like it's just a normal distributed system. But like if the given that like we that these agents are sort of at least semi-autonomous and have access to make use of LLMs and to kind of iterate on their state, it feels like that's something, I guess maybe more of a comment than a question. Like that feels like it's sort of fundamentally different than other types of distributed systems, like that ability to autonomously write or semi-autonomously, for example, generate code. Like one of the really neat applications of agentic systems I'm seeing recently is like having like a tool loop, having like an agentic loop that's like, here, generate. I want to solve this problem. Go and figure out how to do it. Write some code, execute it, that sort of thing. And so that feels like to me kind of like a fundamental difference in like the threat model here. Sorry, I'll stop and let others join.
Go ahead, Ken. I think you're first.
Yeah, so I certainly agree. It's the same thing that Ashish mentioned. It's a kind of autonomy, right? You can make it available a set of tools, but which tool to use, it's non-deterministic, right? It's using its own planning and the reasoning capability to decide, okay, now I need to use that tool. So this could potentially have some kind of security implications that is not in usual application, right? So I certainly agree, but it's kind of in the same kind of autonomy, but autonomy in the process, right? It could be also autonomy at the final decision or final action, right? But yeah, still it's autonomy. Yes.
Makes sense. Vinny?
I think it's good to call out where it's the same, where the problems are the same, because like even with tool use, like, from agent to agent and, talking to external systems, a lot of those things are still the same. You're still concerned with like network security and security of inputs and outputs and all that. So like all of that is still similar, and it would be, I think it's easy to reason about that when you frame it in the way that like a lot of people are kind of used to hearing, and then also expanding on those parts that are different, like that autonomous part and the things that are, truly like not represented yet today.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, and I think, just on top of all that, it's, the non-determinism is the part that really sets it all sort of different, because it's, the indirect prompt injection stuff, all of the ways where like, oh, we didn't think about how this could happen, that you wouldn't worry about with a regular app. So it's, I think, I like the idea of saying it's just an app, because 90% of those same principles apply. And even where the non-determinism causes problems, it's more of being aware of that, because then you're still going to apply general AppSec principles to kind of address that.
Yeah, for sure. So if I look at agents, and I have a little bit of a different perspective maybe than some folks here, because so I work for Salesforce, just for those that aren't aware. And we are not only building agents, but we are also building a platform that allow people to deploy agents, right? So we're building an agent builder as well. So that has some additional unique challenges that don't just come into play with agents if you just talk about it as somebody using an agent. So for example, one of the things that we're struggling with right now is, are there different threat models for specific use cases of agents? So we've kind of broken it down into 3 or so different types of agents. There's agents that are performing actions on behalf of a user, in which case they need to run in the context of that user. And then there's agents that are performing functions to interact with the user, right? So like a customer service chatbot isn't acting on behalf of a user, they are assisting a user, but they have kind of their own user context. So that's one of the things that I think is different here that isn't necessarily the same in a traditional AppSec world. And then the reasoning engine is, I think, the other key thing, right? Basically, we have to come up with, how do we threat model a brain?
Right.
So I think Vinny and then Kayla.
Yeah, totally agree. Like I would love to threat model out some sort of architecture patterns that aren't super like well or aren't being developed by a lot of people just yet. Like like the pattern you mentioned, like one agent talking to another agent and maybe a supervisor agent. Like that threat model is a lot different than just my single agent maybe talking to the outside world. So it'd be really awesome to get some of those more forward thinking architectures into this too.
Yeah. So I do have this like agent to agent interaction, like you said, agent autonomy, and this thing. Of course, we can add more if needed.
Kayla.
Yeah, and I also like the I don't know that this necessarily would have to change anything about how we're approaching this threat modeling activities, but the audience, I feel like, can shift a little bit here depending on like what you said, Jason. Who's building these agents? Is it the business user who is building their own agent for just their daily use, and they're not going to have this foundation in the AppSec practices, or is it going to be the established technology teams who do have that foundation? So I'm not saying we need to translate this for the business user, but I do think there's going to be the different use cases for builders who aren't normally used to seeing this type of annotation around what the threats are for the things they're building.
Yeah, Abby.
I was wondering, I like the idea that we're just going to make sure to call it like an app, or have the call out that this is, an application, and application security definitely still applies. I was wondering, is like unbounded consumption something that maybe kind of sets agentic security like apart from like Gen AI and just application security in general, just because like the O1 model from OpenAI is like designed to spend more time reasoning, and if like you can get it to like be reasoning or thinking for longer, then you're potentially like running up your GPU bill, and then that's like a denial of wallet attack. So I'm not sure like which threat model like might illuminate that, but I think that might be something interesting to discover or look into.
Yeah, for sure. It gets weird in my head with unbounded consumption, because in some ways it's similar to denial of service, but I think like everything else with AI, right? AI has become a force multiplier. So it's no longer just, I've got a service outage. It's also, I'm running up hundreds of thousands of dollars in calls to some API, to ChatGPT or whatever, right? So it is now I don't know that it's a unique risk, but it's got a higher value, I guess, or I don't know what the right words are, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. Yeah, definitely it's different.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
I mean, related to that, I mean, like I think one other area that feels a little unique in the agentic security case is like is code generation, because it feels like it's like I wonder, like, because I think in like one of the use cases I'm seeing at work is like it's like we're trying to build tools that will let you just essentially just define like a workflow that just has that where you specify a goal and let the system sort of figure out ways based on tools that it has access to solve that. And so one of which is like code generation. That feels like something that is, I mean, I'm definitely open to pushback, but that feels like something I haven't seen in a lot of like traditional distributed systems or apps, is like where you have sort of a feedback loop between like an LLM that's like that's being used to generate code, have a code compiler execution engine, go back and do things, and like just the degree of like I guess maybe the capabilities of like autonomously generating code and executing it and doing things just feels a little different. I don't know, but curious to hear other folks' thoughts on that.
I mean, so my thought on code gen specifically is, if you're using code gen and pushing it to prod, it's like you've hired the worst programmer ever, but they churn out so much content and they're so charming that it's just like, why would you stop them? From a security point of view, in theory, you should be doing the same types of checks that you would be doing with like a junior programmer, right? And if you are, then I'm hard pressed to say why it's different coming from an LLM, other than it just feels like it should be. And I don't know that there's a good reason beyond that, and maybe that's a good enough reason. I think there's some conversation to be had around that. Taking that code and executing it without those checks definitely is a bigger problem, right? And I don't think that should ever be the recommended pattern.
Yeah, people actually, it happened, like people using the code generation, generate a Python package, and then this Python, actually it's NPM package. And that NPM package is in the NPM repository. It's a malicious code, and then it runs, right? And also there's this case that it generates an API endpoint for a crypto exchange, and eventually people just get scammed of the crypto. So that, yeah. But the AI agent, like if you look at Cursor, or there's a lot like Lovable, Cursor, and there's many, but I just mentioned this too. Now it has like the Composer and the Cascade, which is a agent actually. If you say, okay, fix this, it will reason it and fix it for you, and even test it, and then launch it. So there is a limited agent behavior, but for now it cannot really push to production yet. And it can push it to GitHub. If you allow it to, it will, but not push it to production. So I think we can say that this is actually in the secure guideline, right? It's not, it's maybe we should say it also in threat modeling, like if you use it, you certainly, this is a threat vector that you need to be careful with in terms of pushing, where do you push the code? Certainly not to the production, maybe to QA environment, right? So for people to test. And there is some effort in terms of the security as a judge, or LLM as a security judge, right? To kind of review the code and to give you some of the feedback. Yeah, but this is a good topic. I would say, like, how can we, from just threat modeling, because Jason's this discussion is more from threat modeling, right? So from threat modeling perspective, this code execution agent, does it give us some specific consideration that we need to think we should put into our threat modeling document, right? If so, we should add a small section there to mention about that. Do you want to take us take a cut on this one, or yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate it. That's really good feedback. I mean, I think it's just occurring to me that I guess there's two potentially different related code generation issues, use cases here. I guess one is what I think a lot of folks were talking about related to like using an AI agent to generate code that would get, you know, checked into GitHub or shipped to production in some way. And I guess the other is like sort of on the fly code generation that's just used for ad hoc settings, you know, like an agent that you just ask to solve this problem for me, like and you know, and one of the tools it has available to it is like a code generation utility, and it just gets a block of TypeScript or whatever, and just runs it to solve a problem ad hoc without any sort of production check-in. I think that also feels like a slightly feels like a slightly new flavor of security issue. I'm not really sure, but sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I wasn't trying to cut you short. I was just getting my hand in there.
Oh yeah, no, go for it. I think that was kind of the end of the thought.
Yeah. So,
Go ahead,
Jason,
Ken.
go ahead. Oh, you go ahead. Yes.
So I think there's also, I guess I hadn't considered this until just now, but the definition of tools and how those tools can be used in ways that are counter what they're intended to be used is also something that's new with Agentic. And so CodeGen comes to mind specifically in the use case of, can I generate toxic content, or can I get the LLM to give me content like it shouldn't do? And I know one of the examples that we've used quite often in our red teaming is we ask whatever we're interacting with to pretend to be an API, right, and return JSON code that gives me the formula for MDMA, for example. So I think, you know, now we've got these agents that have these tools that are supposed to be used for things, but maybe they can be used for other things, and that's probably something we definitely need to account for in the threat model.
And is that, are we going to be covering, oh, sorry, I was going to say, are we covering safety as well as security at that point then? Is that the intent?
That's always a question of debate.
It gets very broad then when you start.
It also gets real. So once upon a time, somebody asked me at a panel for red teaming if I thought generative AI broke the SDLC stack, and I think it does. And one of the ways that I think it does is the intertwining of safety and security is much more closely related in the generative AI space. So I think we have to include it. I think it would be irresponsible not to.
Yeah, so it's sorry for noise. Cleaner is cleaning upstairs. So yeah, I think Shrivas, right? To your original question, I think you are talking about the next level of agent. It's kind of called, I don't know, I wrote a book, right? Beyond AI. In that Beyond AI, it's a spring book, published early this year. I wrote about software as service generated by agent, like on the fly, right? That's the future. Right, but it has a high stake. Like you don't want to have SaaS, like on-time SaaS generated, right? But I think there is one company is trying to do that, right? So this is in addition to the code generation for developer. It's more on the business case. Like you generate a SaaS application immediately based on your prompt. I need some application to do some work for me, and then it spin up a SaaS agent just for yourself or for your company, right? This is the future. It's a very futuristic, but for the low-hanging fruit, it's like not really highly, I would say highly valuable, but it's a frequent low value. Like you just generate a small picture or some sound, maybe it's okay. But if it's large value creation, then you don't want to have this on the fly, right? But this is not here yet, but we can think about that and put it into the threat modeling as well.
It makes sense. No, thanks. Appreciate the discussion.
So we're coming up on time pretty soon here.
Jason, hi everybody. Apologies for joining late here.
No problem.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, you had a slide and maybe I've missed it in the beginning, you had a discussion. Just to reiterate, you had a question of two direction, going with new methodology versus applying existing. Was there a reasoning why we would need to create a new methodology? in my perspective, methodologies that exist can still apply, but methods can differ, and use cases can differ.
Right. Maybe just a quick kind of recap, right, Helen? Yeah, thanks for inviting me here. So we did some analysis of the existing, like, a common threat modeling framework. Strata being the most prominent one, and Pasta and 6 different one. It really depends on the different attack surface and different approach, but all for the threat modeling. And we trying to find out like most of those still applicable, but especially when we're talking about the what we mentioned here in terms of the autonomy and the non-determinism. That's all the discussion, I think, when you join, that still not applies. So the idea is, especially with multiple agent, right? So this is why it's a kind of, it's a framework trying to adjust this multiple agent framework. The naming can be whatever, right? But the principle is really to say this is the kind of the to adjust what we have in terms of the generative AI, in terms of non-determinist reasoning capability, right? And also planning, the action, taking, the autonomy.
Okay, I see what you mean now. All right. So basically extending for autonomy existing frameworks. Yeah. Okay. I
Right.
also like the idea I mentioned in the chat of going with different architecture use cases. I think this is how we can really scale and even perhaps split in a way our work. Based on my participation in other community forums similar like that, I find that this is one of the most efficient approaches when we can agree on the use cases, priority of them,
Right.
split the efforts to work on them, and then review as a common group.
Yeah, I think it's we do need a document to start with. So this is just a draft document, right? We can add some section here, just assign, like one way is to do it, is to see, like, if we have some use case, right? And if someone interested can sign up for it, right? And then to do the use case. And the agent patterns, I think we can borrow the idea from another document that I put the agent patterns there, and then or agent or architecture pattern, right? Agentic or architecture, right? Pattern,
Okay.
right? So we can add there as well. Yeah.
I see the document. I don't know if you have discussed, but do we? What Google Drive are we using for this? Is there one from OWASP, or we just have our own location?
We do have a spot right now. It's just Ken's doc that he's created. We'll make sure we get a workspace set up that we can use to keep everything organized. Right now, it's kind of helter-skelter.
Yeah, we can copy this to the OWASP folder, right? Yeah, certainly, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, I can volunteer to create a structure Excel for signing up on, and like progress Excel for the use cases based on your document, Ken, so
Okay.
that people can also register themselves for the groups and
Right.
add further details. Would that be something that we want to go with as a group?
Yeah, I think we did discuss before you coming. We're trying to start with this one for now. There is consensus, and to do the update, add something. As the key point is still trying to keep it within 20 pages if possible, right? And if like it's too big, we can put this 7-layer as appendix, like 7 layers. It has threat landscape vulnerabilities and mitigation, or we can even remove mitigation because we're doing the threat modeling, right? So there's a way to cut those content down and to add more content there. So yeah, so what I did is I just create a kind of as a first level heading here, the use case. Maybe we can go through it. I think maybe use case should be the final section, right? So we have the use case, and then this should be for agentic architecture pattern. I will copy the proposed agentic pattern from the other document to here, just as a reference point. And then use case, final use case is just to walk through with a particular kind of like maybe using code. Yeah, this is what maybe one example is using code execution or code generation agent, right?
Okay.
Right.
So what would be our next steps? I think I have two questions. First of all, when are we going to meet next? And second question is, what are our action items? I can create the Excel today so people can sign up for use cases as per document from Ken. And but what would we do next? Have you already discussed it?
Nope, I was about to do that. And, perfect timing, perfect segue. So I think the general consensus that I'm going to take back to the Slack channel is we're going to take Ken's doc, use that as a starting point and run with it. We need to move that into the OWASP drive for collaboration. We're leaning towards creating a new quote framework, for lack of a better word, but it's specifically targeted at the delta of what's different in agentic systems. And we're going to apply existing frameworks for other threat modeling at the general app layer. We're going to look at providing use cases for different architectures and use that to split our efforts up. And Helen, you're going to take on creating the logical structure initially so that we can start assigning ourselves to that from there. So I think those are the next steps is we move that doc over, everybody just start piling onto that doc and adding comments, making changes, sign up for the architecture you're interested in, and then we can split up.
Sounds good. So I will post shortly the Excel on Slack. Would that work for now? Until we get the folder or whoever's going to post a folder. Yeah.
Helen, when you say Excel, is Excel document or spreadsheet?
Yes, like spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet, or it's just I find. Go ahead.
So how can we incorporate it with this Google Doc? So you will insert as a table here or inside the document?
Sure, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a workstream definition, so I don't know that it needs to be part of the doc.
Yeah, I find that it's easier to go back to Excel and modify and quickly filter out and whatever. So we can always copy paste the table into doc later if you need.
Yeah, the idea is if we can have just one master doc, so we don't have to go back forth to sync, that will reduce the overhead, right? So if possible, we have just one master doc. That's what I suggest. Yep.
Sure, I think we can hammer it out in Slack.
Right.
I don't know that it makes sense to put the work streams and who's doing what into the doc that we're writing for.
Yeah, like we can put it here, like put the comments, right? Use case, for example, right? We can directly put it.
Sure, I think defining the work cases, use cases make sense there, but probably who's working on them. We can
I can provide insights into kind of collaboration model from my other work stream. And I know Victor is on the line actually as well. He's in that group for AI bomb for CISA. We have also multiple use cases that we're working on. And the structure that we have one master doc that has at the end would have all different use cases, but we work in a separate docs for each use case for the reason so that groups can collaborate and they don't need to load a big document and start updating by accident other people's stuff. Once they're done working with those docs, they can move their stuff. So they go through initial review among the group, then they move everything into master doc, and then we have a community review. However, to manage, who is doing what and which docs are where, we have this Excel that we assigned. And, we have a timeline there. We have names of people, the status or whatever, links and everything. I can suggest the structure. And, if it doesn't work, we can always go back to one big doc.
That's a great idea, because otherwise you end up with so many comments and suggestions, and it gets super hard to read.
It also, breaking out the use cases allows us to have separate docs for different use cases, right? So maybe if I'm only interested in one use case, I don't want to go through this giant doc. I just want to pull the use case doc that applies to me.
Yeah, so I think what I see from other OWASP document, right? It has a revision history, and then the date, right? When you did the revision, right? So you can say like if it's today's, right? It's
You will have the revision with other docs too, right?
Yeah.
So
Each doc
I
has their own
think-
revision history.
yeah.
yes. So something like that, right? And the deadline maybe like this more like time you do the revision, right? And what is changed, right? Something like that. Is that like the most OWASP document has that, and you can just add here as well if you like. And in the particular section, you can just add your name if you want to contribute to that particular work, right? Example, like in the use case here, right? So we can add Shrivas here, right? For code generation agent, threat modeling examples. So I think then everything is clear here, right? Does that
Absolutely can.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it will be clear. Let me show you the structure next time we meet, and
Okay.
then we can also see if it works or not. What needs to be updated there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
All right.
Now, when are we meeting next time?
Yeah, that's a good question. This was intended to be just a one-off meeting to kind of set the direction, go back to John and be like, here's what we think. I think probably we're going to we will have to set up some kind of standing cadence. I don't know what that looks like yet. We'll hammer it out in Slack. It's probably going to be earlier in the day to account for the other side of the world's time zones. So probably like 11 noonish Eastern or so is somewhere in that time frame, probably. I don't have a date.
So here we have a next day call with John on Monday, 23rd. So we can definitely provide an update. It would be good if we have a quick, maybe like 15 minutes follow up on Friday morning, maybe if it's possible, so that people already have their names, so we kind of consolidate if we need to have any other information for our update on Monday as an option. Yeah. And then we can also decide on a date, because there will be holidays. I find it's probably difficult to find the concurrent day right now, common date, right? But starting January would definitely make sense to have it somewhere noonish. Yeah.
Cool. Does Friday work? Do we want to jump on real quick for a quick sync on Friday? I see heads nodding. All right, I'll throw something out just so I'm aware for this group. Like where are people geographically, time zone? I'm U.S. East Coast.
Pacific.
Same.
I'm East Coast, but this Friday would best work for me morning until 11
Okay.
Eastern. Yeah.
And I'm West Coast, and I'll message you separately because I have a permanent thing rolling on Fridays, but I can also watch recordings.
For sure. All right, cool. Thanks. That gives me a good idea. I'll try to set something up that isn't horrible for anybody.
Okay.
All right. I will throw the caption in Slack. The recording and transcript will be posted there as well. And I'll see you all Friday. I'll set that out and make sure everybody that's on this list is also included in that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.